Tashideleg everyone. How are you all doing?
Good.
I'm
fine. Not better. Total, no good. All. That's not completely okay.
She feels completely better now. Suji chunala chanju badu dani chazu chin dagi jinzo jibe tsonam chin dola pinjin sanje duparshu chudan suji chunala chanju badu dani chazu chin dagi jinzo jibe tsonam chin dola pinjin sanje duparshu Chudan suji chunala chanju badu dani chazuchi dagi jinzo jibe tsonam chi dola penche sanje dupaisho sumjandan dewa dan dewe judan denpa juji dunye dan dunye ki judan chewa juji dunye mebe dewa damba dan mindewa juji nyeren chadan tewe danyan chembala nebre juji sumjandan dewa dan dewe judan denpa juji dunye dan dunye ji judan chewa juji dunye mebe dewa damba dan mindewa juji nyeren chadan nidan tewe danyan chembala nebre juji Tamje dewa dan dewe judan denpa juji dunye dan dunye ki judan tewa juji dunye mebe dewa damba dan mindewa juji nyeren chadan yin tewe danyan chembala nebre juji So as we do recite these prayers every day, when you look at the prayers in the book, are you able to understand the meaning of the prayers? That's the Koaragidus.
시당기 당당한 조개 쇼게 당한 한도로 신동을 사지 초조마다 아니 재미신동 거 저당 아니 타마들랑 조이다 이마가랑 가르치나 아니 양화시기라 진짜단 빽빽해 전부다 도다니나라 지당한테 자와카나 가치나 아니 토마다 타마다 parlan 순이라 이네 지당이 도다니데 빽꾸는 반복 토마들래 아니 꾸누나바다 바치야데 빽해 전부 아니 타마들래 소소기 강사시비 겨와디파 신랑 호야디 빽해친 거라 가이스나 먼저 다 이대기 노단로시나 먼저 위로 싸네 타마들래 템보 냐야게 치는 거 칸을 쥐고요라 디 가신나나 다 소소기 칸 쥐어네 지금마다 자와다 톰좀 되네 마셔야 쳇더라 근데 인디가랑 하나씩 겨와 싸셔지 니마니마 가르싸셔지 gondaya hotuwaina ani sosoge ta karle mi no hoina pena jobe lana me pe jobe shangchu saje komana hoina saje mathapada ani thigi debude de laura ta sosoya sososo chik tenjo milu cham thaba chilang hoina re thaba cham thaba chilang hoina re ta sososo miyu ja chali chebaya tindege antene hoya hotuwaina thi patong ajola ta jamjang kondo di 지 소소의 겨지 제티 버르네 콘돌라야도 도차세나 콘도 ngodu chungura tidugala antema manjomya temochiniala andiore lagonra ra
So I think it is particularly important to understand the significance of these prayers. And if you have noticed, we recite the refuge prayer in the morning, the refuge prayer and the immeasurables in the morning. And then at the end of a day's session, we do a dedication prayer. So from a Buddhist perspective, we place a lot of importance on shaping the motivation at the start of the day or at the start of any activity. And then at the end of any activity or at the end of the day, it is important to make a dedication. So this process of making a dedication is one, to ensure that you still are remaining faithful to the initial motivation. And two, it's to dedicate the virtue that we have accumulated in the course of a day by engaging in a spiritual activity such as attending teachings, whatever virtuous activities one have engaged in, to dedicate the merit that we have accumulated from it, either towards achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, or it could be simply also making a dedication of the virtue that you have accumulated towards achieving a favorable birth in your next life as a human being, or it can also be dedicated towards achieving liberation from samsara. So if we think about it, look at the manner in which we earn money, save money, and then we do deposit it in a bank to ensure that we do not lose it, it doesn't get stolen, and so forth. So making a dedication at the end of a spiritual activity or at the end of a day is something similar to this, that we are making a deposit of merit to ensure that it doesn't get exterminated, doesn't go to waste. Because it is indeed the case that even if we do engage in spiritual and virtuous activities, there are moments wherein we give in to afflictions such as anger, attachment, and so forth. So this is to ensure that the root merit itself is not exterminated by these moments of weakness. And that's why in Buddhism we say that at the end and at the start of any activities, two things. So dedication at the end of and generating a pure motivation at the start.
근데 인디가 아니 가지고 지당 호화들에 수수기 제치를 쳐보다 심지 생기 미바라 라니 치부 타바상태 되는데 라니 타바타사디 딩데부디 조르 아니 지게 바 사제 공항도시 더야라 셔와네 디 사제 공항 마태버드 디 아니 가서 주디 디그랬습니다 지당 먼저 취미지면도 마빠네 꾸눌을 쳐보시우다 라 꾸눌 나빠다바지 배 타바다 탄제 쳐비 고마 준주오쇼 라디 저는 디 지식이 딘데부디 마태버드 안 된다 유지도 돼요. 라. 뭐 된다 기쳐봐요. 가장에 근데 깔아 치냐. 따라 손보라. 근데 이제 다 단다디 깔아게 친데도 자야나 빼나 다 건조순으로 사제셔는 초남라스. 다디 샹추 바르드 다네 잡스체레디가라 아니 단다 가서 샹추 다 수수티 타바다 탄제 참바다 근데 고마 마테 바데 아니 잡스체레디가라 다 수수기 잡스 드기인 나오라. 빼나 가서 단다 산스크트나레야 부담샤난 가차밀레데 도저라. Tende the patches chicken patches and draw doings. Tende in some any that Casana Jeps and Donan de Penalunga is on the Tebacan Ra, Taga the Titans on Bologna trans on ten leisure. Tende give somewhat happening. Chichiban, Tendero Maimba, Chikunu Nambatapa, same Sanjang, and it touched the patch. I eat so the Mahi so the Mange Ra, Tendeji Gani, Anipa, Conal Jeps do a chair. Ani is the Consusuna. 아니 다기 전소 집을 초남지 레디다 단다 디가라 전소 파신 둘러 소바다 소소기 겨와 가르지 싸워 샤체 코라 가르치 보이느라 단다 전소 레디가라 디나로라 가즈나 점바 추rum 저바 춘드 삼데 시럽 돈 삼디고라 덴데 집이 아니 초 가시기 소남지 레디 가시 초남지 레 간다 덴데기 아니 소사샤 주디 아니 소소 남자 가지고 미빠데 소소 사실 소소를 되면 고바도 삼산데 거라 산 자춘주이나 디야 아니 소소기 기본 마인게 아니 돌라 펜션 돌아서 또 심전 탐지기 아니 던줄라 펜야게 치데 아니 그래서 돌라 펜시를 아니 산전 두버쇼 근데 이게 소수 그 강 사샤비 소놈디 아니 소수 집어 많이 벌어 심지 다질라 아니 가서 템브로 쇼선이 되게 많아 줘라 뜻삼아 너 심지 다질 아니 사지기 고방 대회기 진주로 쇼란 되게 삼당 거다.
So now, when we talk about the significance of these prayers, then we do realize that when we are talking about the dedication prayers and these refuge prayers, then it really does depend on the scope of motivation with which you recite these prayers. For example, the object of dedication, if it is simply dedicated towards achieving liberation or achieving a favorable rebirth for yourself and the next life, then that's the extent of the merit that you accumulate. That's the extent of the manner in which the merit you accumulate manifests itself. Now, as opposed to that, if the object of dedication is the well-being of all sentient beings, achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, then that cause of root virtue that you accumulate remains until the moment you achieve enlightenment. So we need to appreciate that. And so if we look at the first prayer, refuge prayer, we talked about how it's about shaping our motivation. So through the recitation of this refuge prayer, we are in effect trying to exactly do that, opening our motivations up to include the welfare and benefit of all sentient beings. So the first two lines is related to taking genuine refuge in the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. So it reads, I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. And now this is, as you recite this daily, it is important to reflect on it and go to true refuge. Go for true refuge in these jewels, not just a superficial sense of refuge, but go to refuge from the body, speech, and mind to these three jewels. Then moving on, by the two accumulations created by practicing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So this in turn is shaping our motivation at the start of the day, that through the practice of generosity, any kind of spiritual activities, then through the virtue, merit that you accumulate, you are dedicating it to achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Because many times we have a sense of expectation with regards to how we approach our spiritual practices. We only expect the results to manifest for ourselves in ourselves. And maybe that's not the motivation with which you are advised to approach spiritual practices. Your motivation should be all-encompassing, expansive, inclusive of all sentient beings. So this you recite in the morning to help yourself shape your motivation.
단다간서 치미시대 된다. 심지엔 당시 대화다. 대위 주당 댐버지 제가 다 맞은 도와를 심지엔 당제라다. 다 맞은 맞추다도 단당한테 질라 상주 센터 시제도 시셔라. 근데 일단 심지엔 당제더라. 지당한테 가다는 쉬어래. 심지엔 당제 대화도 받아. 능임도 지충라. 당한테 받자 쳐서 질라 생각 된다. 쓰임도 다 가르다. 지 참말라 대화도 라. 지 세통에나 야고르 거에나 소소가서 집어지야는 지글라 야가다 지글 두어고야 개엄 사만 너단 집어라 라마라다 니마니다 수수게 내다 선남게 디 여마에도 로가레마도 너단 참마 대원도라 근데 이 안에 심전한지 대화다 대위주다 대화지 안에 된대위 대위 주다 템버치지스 근데 담평남도 하자죠 아니 동해다 동해기 주다 저와지 세상 안저 동해 땅 옷은 나라서 나와 차이나 가리는 직제가 나지 동해라 소바도 저기 파테와치지스 아니 대장도 맞지 된대위 동해장 대바장도 맞지 된대위 동해 가는 중요히 시 아니 주디야 안에 대다 가르쳐 태와치지스라 메바차 쇼르라 아니 동해 메비스다 된대위 동해다 안에 동해기 주다 태와이나 동해 메바차이라 dungi meba ina ani karun sana dewa yu dewa de dewa chu de jibata do sanje komala sobara dewa tamba ta mendewa chile de te dewa tamba de kama dewa de kadu ni ngantole ti ta de ani sosole dember chu chi le ani de tanda mazeta nyering chadang zanto ngaran sele nyering yura chi ranshola ani chabada jenshola tangwa ra nyering la de tin nyewala de kala sosugi thi de la ani nganzo ta nyeburo tsu 대집이 준세대 전에 지랑이 다 내부전에 개야말라 소소 가보 내부 참고 전에 야시로 이내야 근데 내부들라 아니 가서 그 차신전에 아니 들라 가서 칼로 배 칼로다 샘 투주의 시로 참 자신 찾아내라 대랑쇼를 쉬우지 숨져져 연쇼를 쉬우지 당와 마가 같은데 제주 말았으라 예린 차단이다 아니 근데 라쇼라 차바다 연쇼라 당외 근데 차단의 제위 아니 참말로 건을 따투바 당한서 깔라카버다 라 담보시나 지기 소소에 가사야서 지라 야포지 거야지 소소 지기 마가사지라 두오나 사면 대야 지기 시라가 마가 두오마도 난데 더 시라메지라 먼저 다가스다 다녀로 내거라 이내 대전도 맞지 먼저 소소 가사이네 소소 마가사이네 소소 녀이네 소소 드라이네 더 참말라 아니 따님 집어지 않다 두어지 라 된대질로 줘셔래 난데 만나더라
So moving on, now the next prayer that we recite is the four immeasurables. Now when we are thinking about the four immeasurables and when we are reciting the four immeasurables as a prayer, it is important to reflect back on our extensive discussion about first accepting the fact that we are all common in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So if we are able to reflect on this, then this prayer becomes much more profound. And it starts with, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, because that is in essence what we all desire. None of us intentionally wants suffering. What we truly desire is happiness. So not only may all sentient beings have happiness, but also the causes of happiness. Then moving on, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So coming back to our point that we all indeed are similar in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. That being the case, even though there is a difference in the experience, this comes from our own karma and our own accumulations. And now, moving on, may they never be separated from happiness that is without suffering. So, as you pray for sentient beings to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, then when they do achieve true happiness, genuine happiness, then you make the aspiration and prayer that they never be separated from such a happiness that is without suffering. Now, more importantly herein, happiness refers to happiness that is derived from your spiritual practice. Ultimately, it refers to liberation and enlightenment. And now, moving forth, this is really important, the last line. May they dwell in great equanimity, free from attachment to some and aversion to others. Now, the normal manner in which we relate to others is through attachment and aversion. We are extremely attached to those who we consider our close and near ones. Now, I'm not saying that it is totally wrong to become attached or have love for your close and near ones. But in the process, if we become extremely attached, then we become disturbed. And similarly, we have the sort of tendency to become averse or angry towards what we do not consider to be our own, our near ones, or our dear ones. Now, as opposed to these conceptions of nearness and farness and the manner in which you relate with attachment and aversion to these relationships, the equanimity that is aspired to here is not a dull indifference or apathy. The equanimity, as it suggests here, great equanimity, refers to being able to look at all sentient beings equally, not with dull indifference, but with the same love, care, and concern.
근데 이리가 당아주기 Dizun den ri gala sanong pe tang we dara. Zamda ngaz lamda lusu tsam ro do di gora. Ngaz ya tambo la di chi gore ani di chi gola na. Zamda lamda lusu cha de ja. Sanong ma tang. Inji mi ji din de ngaz sanong ta de pe ke che mu sa re chi nima nima sanong ta. Ani so so gi thaba de ma karin de ge nima la so so khande chi ge na teblo ge te ma sanong ya po ta de pe ke che mu sa ra. Ta ngaz chi ngo chu la ma chi mambu chi che de na so sen lan jo ta ya ji da 아지 이 야라 섬에 기치 조지 마테나 내가 저 아우네 저기 만다 로죠 근데 차이인가 더 가서나 네 처럼서 라고다 나란 잠자 들이 체이더라 담보시네 가는 아주 단대야 아주 지다 어느 명아 마무리 시절 간대 마무리래 한테 많이 배서서 남들 지사대 있다 먼저 기심하게 주대 산이시는 그 마무리인데 가서나 이게 뭐 주대 가서 주대다 근데 대부 넘버로 간대 좀 제라입니다 근데 찬이제는 수족이 강요 주는 직권다도 뭐 지열 다 담은 거는 마사는 다 야보 뺀데 거 다. 그래서 담은 것도 살들 마사는 땅 야본 되거든. 되네 마마마는 아니 저전에도 nhập 도로 차라. 아니 저거 저더라. 근데 지카도 하모더라. 지당이기나 오늘기 추나 받아 봤잖아 야보다는 밀어 오늘은 야볼라니나 수수냐미 쓰신데 야보 지니 아니 파기 라와이나 밀 팽이르도. 봐. 소소에 딱 받침으로는 밀라라나 안에 팬도 영화. 이내 영화를 강의 중인데 지게데 잠잠 지 nhập 도르 차 니군 칼레도 카 아니잖아. 잠자 타마들 완 저거 저거 더시도 사나 땅 통다. 근데지자. 지는 아주 배천 가르라나 아 간디지기 되여. 먼저 라네다고 먼저 다 간디지래 먼저 상주 선바에 막kel랑 거라. 근데 이 그런 게 냐마 부 아마질에 부고드는 아무 사야라 가부시 여서라. 아 근데 아니 간디지 남도 그런 아무 취해라 가고요체. 근데 아마 되겠다 남도 간디지 깨다 첨부체 아니 그런지 미참하게 쓰사이 되갈 아니 그런 부고드는 아무 사야라 가고여서 간디지 근딜라 트친다. 아니 이 부리베 부에는 보면 하면서 하다 아무 사야라 빼 가고두스 아니 간디지 랍자시저로 지송 쉬다. 쉬다가 아니 간디지게 된다직 젤쇼스 타탄다가 알아서 제tuk 말했어. 인천 된다직 젤쇼스온다. 이 아니선 아니 아마데 마트다. 아니 간디지 디퍼로 된다직라 아니 간디지 ngamu 취입니다. 아니 마슈치 아니 마 젤라 아마다 디포니 리드가 아니 걸을래지. 디 카를라나 남도 코나 ngamu 취디디가 아다이 심발라 진 ngamu 마살라나 소소라네 따야 말아. 디 된다직 디 마취네 아니 젤라 pala de puguda amali digal ani labjejeda ani ngam cheyamata kanda didigalta karkar suine hago martanda sodo zoda neba chagre pugu chik mam suine yirwa o dindil labjejeda ti karate ngorlana tambu mil labjejala susu nyamne chigo tengo ra dinde indigal ani ngara namdi ngara chingde didigal sana yabo taya te pekechame ni nge tanda de karla ngara ya tama tashi dilama sana yabo tantu mate ni nge chero zalla shago ra ine ta ganzu karine 지금 sembananda 이 제도 빼게 전부더라 지당아도 취취래데 미게를 니 지윤도도다 아니 니지 지니 지를 깨다샤도 되게 지고만 취래데 또 소소 나라서 라지도야래마도 바이 미기 지금 빼는 미지 점바다이나 나디 땅고에는 된데 지고엔 된데 지고에지 라
So now, and it is important that we approach the recitation of these prayers with some sense of intentionality. Otherwise, it just becomes an act that is following a particular custom. It just becomes an expression of culture and custom, and you simply kind of go through the motions when you are reciting these prayers. And it is extremely important to reflect carefully on the meaning of each of these verses. As you recite, reflect carefully on the meanings, and this will help you to shape your motivation if you reflect carefully. And if you are able to shape your motivation, then this eventually helps you to transform the mind. And if we don't do this, then it's almost like a parrot reciting the prayers. It's nothing really different. And now I say this because I find myself sometimes not reflecting carefully on the prayers and recitations that I do. Because while I was preparing for the Geshema examinations, I didn't really find any time in the day for recitations and prayers because I have to keep studying, make time for my study. Now after I have finished my exams, then I always have my daily recitations and prayers. Now, even after finding the time to do daily recitations and prayers, sometimes I'm able to concentrate, reflect carefully on what I am reciting, but after a while, it gives into boredom, laziness, tiredness, and then at the tail end of these recitations, then it becomes really fast. You do not really reflect on it anymore. Maybe that is not the approach to take. To recite these prayers with intentionality, reflection, and through this reflection to shape your motivation, and through shaping your motivation, then take that as a means to transform your mind. This is important. Now, I think it is particularly important for us to cultivate a proper spiritual practice ourselves, a genuine spiritual practice ourselves, even with regards to recitations and prayers, even anything simple before we can effectively begin to advise someone else to do something. Otherwise, it's a little bit hypocritical, you know. And I am at this point reminded of a story of the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi. And it is said that at one point a mother brought a child in front of Mahatma Gandhi and asked Gandhi to advise the child not to eat too much sweet, because the child was given to eating a lot of sweets. And as such, the mother brought him in front of Gandhi and asked Gandhi to give the child some advice. And Gandhi didn't immediately begin to give any kind of advice, but told the mother to bring the child after a week. And then after a week, the mother brought the child in front of Gandhi. And at that point, Gandhi began to give him advice. And then the reason that Gandhi told the mother to bring the child only after a week was, up to that point, Gandhi himself was enjoying a lot of sweets. So after a week, he stopped eating sweets for a week, and after a week, then, without being hypocritical, he can begin to offer some sort of advice to the child. So that's the kind of approach we should have about our own spiritual practice before we begin to look to giving advice, guidance to others. It is important. Before giving unsolicited advice to others, it is important that we ourselves are practicing properly. Because many times in our minds we have like an audience and we make a show out of things. That's not the approach we need to take towards spirituality, because spirituality is all about inner transformation. And as long as you are able to subdue your mind in the moments of challenge, setback, then that in itself is enough. You don't have to make a show of it.
세상 잠잠 아주 자치미 야게로 이나 지금 gen다를 된 아니 잠잠 아주 대우행인 것도 할로다 스 땅다 탁받을라 차라 지단이 수수 준노 땅래 야보리 가르네 준노 짐바 땅나 하는지 잠잠아서 오 땅에 땅에 있는 거 민청보라 그래 나를 깨다인 그래 이미 똥표 청보라 그래 아니 그 민야게래 근데 이게 깨다인 잠잠아서 당목근우 아버지 짐바 땅 와서나라 근데가 차이인 거다 아 근데서는 그런 케이스 짐바로 땅에 있는 그는 넘버다 파기들 지 편하다 아니야 수족이 지기 다바다 던지지 대야 수지부만 이게 순제 탐식이 되는데 이 근데기 소소 고무식마도 마다나 편치하다 라 아니 고무 ton라마 뭐지 뉴로 가르스다 제노로지 칼라 가리네 망보지 땅 아니 디 고누디 너니 어가 지게다 첨보로 미다오로 미 그궁으로 근데지 사마이나 아니 소소 주나요더니 아니 편도에 시라미리 라 근데 책이었어라.
And it is extremely important to realize the significance of these prayers when we do recite them. It's about cultivating and shaping our motivation. And now with regards to any kind of spiritual practice, such as practicing generosity and so forth, intention or the motivation is extremely important. And for example, it is very, very liable that people sometimes become motivated to practice generosity by making donations, making food donations, donations with this kind of consideration. They associate the act of generosity with some sort of prestige, some sort of status that they gain from engaging in such acts, and thinking that, oh, if I practice generosity in this manner, then people will look at me differently. I will become famous, and as such, I will gain a certain sense of prestige and status in the eyes of people in society. That's a completely wrong, misguided intention to practice generosity. Rather than that, it is important that even before you begin to practice generosity, it is important to look at the intention carefully. And the intention should be to benefit others, not for yourself to gain a sense of fame, prestige, and status in society. And if you are able to do that, then also the virtue that you accumulate from engaging in such acts of generosity and so forth can be dedicated towards all sentient beings. And this is the manner in which it becomes a true spiritual practice. Have you heard about this anecdote about Gandhi that we just commented? So this is now, as you look at the story of Gandhi, then similarly, at the start of the Lamrim text, Jitsongamba makes the point extremely clear that it is pointless to try to subdue others without subduing your own self. And this is especially true if we try to look at our own lives. For example, if we ourselves engage in all manners of negative actions and so forth, and then begin to expect others to listen to our advice about not engaging in negative actions, this is very hypocritical, and others wouldn't even listen to you because they will cite the fact that you yourself are engaging in all these negative actions, and then you expect someone else not to engage in these negative actions. So that's why Tsongkhapa says that it is pointless to try to subdue others without having first subdued yourselves. So with regards to any kind of spiritual activity that we undertake in our lives, it is important, any virtuous activity that we undertake in our lives, that it is important that it is not contaminated and stained by selfish concerns, worldly concerns of fame, status, gain, and so forth. And this is particularly true for someone like me who has to offer teachings to participants. So as such, even if you have the name of a spiritually ordained person, if your motivation is contaminated by worldly concerns such as being popular, being famous, having a lot of students and gaining fame and so forth, then all the time that a spiritual teacher extends, all the effort that a spiritual teacher puts into offering teachings goes to waste effect. It's no longer an effective or genuine spiritual teaching. So it is important for all of us as instructor as well as participants to keep this in mind, that we say that we are someone, we look at ourselves as people who strive for spirituality, who want to engage in virtuous actions, but if we are not careful, our motivations renders the whole pursuit, the whole effort ineffective if the motivation itself is contaminated by these kind of concerns of fame, gain and wealth and so forth.
Tetende chidi chidangi chiranzi kaza lorik jangi yin lagdra. Tasana yabutanda lorik di nima nganzu shira yo mare, tsan sagi mare ra. Tende jini gala tanda lojong di kayo la yo nganzu nima nyunyu chi nanglo la pendo chia yo sare san lojong shigwa samsara. Yine tanda dingi la nganzu tanda shanchu senchu rumbache di ima drakhi ji jawa sam. Yine shanchu senchu rumbache la yo gala ani tambuti la nadisara.
Now, in the last session, we talked about maybe we make time to explore mind and awareness as a topic in the coming sessions, but I took some time to reflect on this, and then when I look at the scope of the topic, then it's a little bit too big for the time that we have with each other. So I thought it might be more wise to study a text that is a little bit more practical. So I thought it would be better if we look at the 8 verses of training the mind in the few days that we have together now. Has any of you studied the 8 verses of training the mind before? Joyce.
Yeah, I like it.
If you have studied it before, then do not worry about it. We always need revision. The importance of such a text cannot be emphasized or stressed enough. So in Tibetan we have a saying, with regards to the profound Dharma, you have to listen to it 100 times. With regards to anything important in life, you cannot begin to stress it enough. Now, before we actually explore the 8 verses of training the mind, maybe we look at the dedications, the dedication prayers. The first of these reads, "May the precious bodhicitta arise, if not yet born, and when generated, may it never diminish, but increase more and more." So herein, when we make this dedication, as we already discussed how we define bodhicitta first, it is important to reflect on that. So bodhicitta is called the awakening mind. The awakening mind herein, citta referring to mind, bodhi referring to awakened or awakening. So bodhicitta refers to an aspiration or a motivation which is aimed towards achieving complete and perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So that's what the awakening mind is. That's what bodhicitta is. It's that aspirational motivation to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And so herein, when it says, may the precious bodhicitta arise if not yet born, then it suggests that there is a manner in which such an awakening mind is generated. And there are two methods through which one generates the awakening mind. The first one is through the process of equalizing and exchanging the self for others. And the second method is a more gradual method called the 7 precepts of causes and fruit.
rangi tsileng tuwe tende ki samu chidang kayu la yung anzu jebu jaya da yung mara da ta chigi satobe shangchu samba da tende ki tokwa yu nye tu tsuki tende leng tuwe jirwa ina ngaranzi kayu la yu da chituku mara da ngaranzi nyeri tende sho tsomba chi rwa di sho la chima chi shengi beda shangchu sengi tanda da shen yanji tende ki pe shengi dungi rangju la leng rangi dewa da pa katu tiye tsong jaya na wada jaya yung mara da rwa tende sho tsomba nganzu jaya mambu yara nima rwa pena chik soso chik desa ina sasa ina khare ina chik yaa de shen la tiya da ani chik miyamba de soso ki chiya tende chida nganzu chitu ura thapa da nganzu ta chunzu de pechi basa na tena dhugi jima tende dhugi kala mi kange chi tende kashi gengo re kashi pu kudinyi re tende la ani nganzu guja jebu jaya rawa da rwa ani yang chik mi shenpa la ropa chiya rawa chala rawa chakma tena tuzu la ropa chiya rawa ta nganzu ki chik mambu yo rwa tende ani sho tsumba ki tende ki chawa geju chiya mambu jira tuzu nganzu chiya guya te peke chamba resra.
So the first of these method is the process of equalizing and exchanging the self for others. So herein, as it suggests, there is first a process of equalizing oneself and others. Now this is exactly what equanimity is, and wherein we reflect back upon coming to acceptance of the fact that we are all similar in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Now, on the basis of that radical acceptance, then even though you cannot directly begin to offer all of your joy, comfort, and happiness to others, and take upon their suffering, misery, and so forth, but it's a manner of cultivating the motivation through visualization. And this helps us to overcome the manner in which we look at relations with a sense of expectation, the manner in which we look at our relationships as simply being transactional. You give something, give and take, that kind of, we approach relationship with that kind of attitude. So it's to overcome that manner in which we look at relationship as purely transactional, or we look at our relationships as a way of fulfilling our own expectations. So it's to overcome that. And through that visualization, by visualizing that since all sentient beings are equal in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, may I be able to take upon all of their sufferings, miseries, and may I be able to offer all of my joy, happiness, and merits for them. And through that kind of visualization, then one can learn to overcome selfish motivations, and then develop a true sense of altruistic motivation. And now, when we look at this, it is important that we do not leave it simply at a practice, as a practice of visualization. Through this, we need to try to shape and transform our motivation to effectively be able to express these motivations in our daily lives through our actions. And we should not immediately expect to make like a grand gesture or grand expression of this motivation, but simply finding it within yourself to maybe offer a seat to someone who needs it in the bus. It's a small expression. Similarly, someone who needs an elderly, a woman with child, Then, if you are crossing the road, helping someone who has a lot of luggage with the luggage to cross the road. So small acts of kindness. Through this kind of, by trying to shape our motivation in this manner, we can slowly try to make an expression of it, this motivation in our actions. And then gradually we can make a true expression of this motivation in our actions by completely engaging in altruistic actions.
한전도 미기 산나타나지라 셴라짱이 산데 나 충라야 돼. 셴산에 산데 날 스치길래 그러지래 못다. 라. 근데 말에 지당이 나랑 저기 쓰이네. 소소기 파야 아버지 셴나 야래요 당벌에 또 집을래 지는 가지고 버체나 야야 말아. 이내 가랑식이 미랑식이 소소 파야 아버다 냠촌데 지금 바체는 미랑식이 츠 야버지라. 소소 파 보셔신 남는 미미등가 산나 마체 땅땅 더더라. 아, 그 벌써 유실래로 된 내용이다. 봐. 파기 소소이 제당하다 소소기 양 주바다 소소기 셈바 두자체나 라시기 쓰러지다. 제상한 저기디야. 군두기 양세양세 송유라단다. 이대 대화 주제다 신주기 진행서라. 이대 대화 진입바 대고 젠된들을 총으로서. 이대 동에 진입바 대고 란된들을 총. 봐. 이대 나로를 대화 간대 지유바 있는 딘주사마 야보 따지 제우들가 젠된 데비로 텐데실에 되는 총으로서. 라 지대 거랑 알아서 동이 마보여 라 시기 마투 메기 가르네다 동이 마보시 디고 참마 란데 코주 로 텐데실에 되는 총으로서. 라 맞지 내가 참마인 바라 산에 약보다는 된데로 차대요.
So now when we talk about such things, such altruistic intention, then many people actually begin to say that, okay, then this is not really something practical at all, because if I do everything for others, then who would look after me? Who would look after me? Who would have concern for my well-being? That's not the case at all. If we are able to engage in altruistic activities with true and pure intention, then there is humility in the way we engage in these actions. There is a sense of true compassion in the manner in which we engage in these activities. So as such, others also develop a true sense of intimacy, closeness towards you, and they will have a concern about your well-being. But as opposed to that, if we approach these altruistic actions not with an altruistic intention, but with a sense of expectation that this must be reciprocated, then the manner in which we engage in these actions maybe comes off as a little bit arrogant, and then people, even the people that we are helping, do not appreciate it too much. So this is important to understand, that your own well-being and your own concerns are addressed as a byproduct, actually, as a natural byproduct of engaging in altruistic actions. And I think this is exactly the reason that His Holiness the Dalai Lama stresses all the time and quotes this quote from this verse from Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life often. And I think it is helpful to reflect on this particular verse when Shantideva says that all happiness in this world comes from wishing happiness for others. All suffering in this world comes from wishing happiness only for yourself. And if we reflect upon this, this is indeed true. And that all fulfillment, happiness, joy that we see in this world really do come from wishing happiness, working for the benefit of others. Whereas when we look at all forms of misery, war, conflict, it all comes from wishing only happiness for yourself.
그래도 배낭은 저기 lumba 마지야 저도 가르치는 저걸로는 수수 lumba들 약보유한도 산나티 콜로데 디어라 고테도 파기들 많이 야잖아 수수지 약보서 수수 제거도 슈보서 수수 제거도 배 현다 말아 서고서 미 건도 디어라 이내 가서 대화는 저 때문에 등행이랑 거 봐주려셔 되게 제어로 지겨라 세상 dewa pena gochejin o nge lomba de yapos nge keta so nge mishamba jeka wan de jutuna tanga yashiro chegre ta dene mesenje rumba ina kosana tanda dene jora ngena dendeji da ani ya ona jeka pasho shemba ge jono lonje la chawa ta dende kunzo wan de jutu ina kunzo ge teka de nganzara gire ro kuzo mumbo da kharena ta nge ngawdu do ne nga shiwe yako chegre mi dende jora dendeji sano dendeji tanga ani chi maja da pa lumba wan de juya ne dendeji ndu gala dewa yunga pachacho di pagi deba samaraya pachacho susu gi juno lonche da di pagi mila macha wala susu gi dosu mambuchi tangura susu gi mi mambuchi mami tangu dunzu sama segi yore ani susu gi koyu le mi paja wana shi tsuya jagura jadi gala susu koyu le neshen rugda an tanda di muto zanda matsi ani maamba muto la manu yagi tindegi pe di san zei nyamba dine pacha shuye do ra sacha kora beto kora tsa kora chaya me jo mading suje tu sama kharla na rande ndoye ra nga yapo cha ngi je ka yapo cha ngi mi ma yapo cha skulu dende jura dende ji ki chawa che machine ani dende tsang yo ra dende nga zu khayu la yo thong da ra tem na yo ba chi po mai mo ngone re de ta jam jang zu ki te pa lo ani ngone ki distan so so ki tsu khapo ne so so la ngone ki namdu nyere yungu de ta san ta na ani selen jo ma do da ale te lo sun sha yapo chi chi po ji nga na dang mu da tepta ti ngone di sunya de 수수기 ngone nyere takta yungu de mi ta dini ni jahi chana ne ngone selen jo thiba chilida de ngone kecham insarang.
So now it is important that we do reflect on these verses and relate it to our own lived experience if we are to transform our minds, because simply the verses in themselves cannot help us to transform our minds. It takes reflection on the verses, on these words, by relating it to our own lived experiences. And when we see that this is indeed true through our reflections on our lived experiences, then the verses have the effect of helping us transform our minds. Otherwise, it is a little bit difficult. So when we say that all happiness in this world comes from wishing happiness for others, and all suffering in this world comes from wishing happiness only for yourself, then it is important to reflect on this, whether this is true or not. And then when we look at the manner in which countries, nations engage in conflict, war, and so forth, then and we understand the misery, the havoc, the suffering that it causes when countries engage in wars and conflicts, then we understand, if we reflect on this particular verse, that this is indeed true, that a particular country attacks another country out of selfish concern, saying that, okay, I want the natural resources for myself, for my own people, for my own country. And so all of these conflict and so forth really do come from only wishing happiness for yourself, selfish concern. My own country's well-being, my own country's security. And now in the process, we, even though we do aspire to achieve happiness, due to our own ignorance, we live our lives as if we are running towards the causes of suffering. And then this is true in the manner in which a country, when it engages in war, attacks another country, says that they want to protect their country's own security, they want to protect the country's own natural resources and so forth, but in the process of engaging in war, they lose so many resources of their own, human resource, environmental resource, financial resource, and not even talking about the fact that the other country will also retaliate, and that this conflict, if not solved, then continues for generations and generations. The future security of a country is essentially put at risk. And when worse comes to worse in this day and age, there are such unthinkable weapons which can incinerate whole towns, whole states in a matter of second. And what exactly did it achieve, and where exactly did this kind of action come from? It come from that selfish concern of wanting happiness only for oneself. Do you think this is true or not if you begin to reflect on it.
라 소소가 산스탕고라 니 데벨라지 오마이 바테네라지 오마이 라다 계식 다기 딘데기 다 마투미게레 같이 제도 티 딘조기 미드조기 건 따니나 드조기 산스탄 오 니기 제컵라 대하고 바나시 콘조 제컵라 디고라스 먼저기 니기 멤버든들 지보다 담보다 사야도야 가리나 먼저 무슨서 고바나시기 하게들래야 고고라스라 디버룰라 트렌디 마디지 총대다 다치 가린 계셔를 미기 바로 계시시 약보체 아니 파셜룸바의 시대 드쇼룸바의 시대 아니 소소유단데 준노 강에 바디 다가라 되거라 파저스저는 감바또 아니 지남도 또 다지 사자또를 마무서나 파셔스저 닌자를 내다 닌자를 개뱀다 라 닌자게 상노 약보 따요나 딘데기 다신 제가 삼바로지 오 ngalai dewa gopana shi khole gore sam tene samtana ku phagelen zinga dogo mari maja mari chashi teng mara di mare je nga kipu kemela samtane ni je ol lega chani maja ranjer khonzo katang sara chego gora ani khashi hagu mari ta tando mode no ni je ku chende da nga so tangelane dile nyamdo khunro ro shilani nan dogo maja ain ra tinde yor ni ko de chin kunzi charo gora dari tambo tsuji duje chana a kenya mang zo chi sesu ni sesu chi zilani yang phalera tende 아니 좋다미 바지 땅을 밑에 용되다. 라. 디다 가르스는 잠링 나로 칠로다 지 안간조기 가로다 잠자 아트코이클로다 지 망부틀이야. 온도 참아 란슈글레 줘라. 이네 이제 마자로 지 망부지 간서 강이 망부지 튀다. 또 참아 수조래. 나란 좀 미기수. 미디에 가르쳐는 라제고 바시야 판고 바. 덴데기 내가 망부지 짬. 라. 배나서 때간다 망부지 거네. 소소기 슈고차 소소지 benjo yaponya junono je yaponya chid sogora tene mambo jongo tha chine ani koyulane ani per koyu chobo cha ani chicholo jana mambo chilegida ra ta sama khalsna ta dajenya je sando tamato ensa legor ra tenche tang bed khorobe dajenya chanchuse tende jizomato na te sho sombaje ganzole cheyayora.
So now, if this is important to reflect on, not simply because I say it so, or the text advises us to think in this manner, but we should also be personally able to reflect on it on our own, and come to our own conclusions, come to our own convictions about our reflections. Now, as opposed to this, if the leaders of such countries are able to understand that just as the people in your own country deserve prosperity, security, then also the people of the other country also deserves prosperity and security. If the nation's leaders are able to understand it in this manner, then they will not immediately jump into a conflict, will not immediately jump to declare war. They would use dialogue, communication, diplomacy to address concerns. And as such, the prosperity, happiness, and security of the people of two nations remain intact. There is a sensible way to approach differences and address concerns. Otherwise, if without this, then we know the consequence all too real in all these wars and conflicts that we see in the world today. And now this is an expression exactly of that process of equalizing and exchanging the self for others. Even if you are not able to generate an awakening mind itself, there is that basic acceptance of our core human values, of being able to communicate with each other of our concerns, being understanding of our shared humanity, and so forth. Now, and this is important to reflect on because many of the large-scale suffering in this world today are essentially man-made in their nature. Apart from the natural disasters such as earthquake and so forth, many of the suffering, large-scale suffering in this world is indeed created by men themselves. And even when we are talking about natural disasters, now in this day and age, climate change is all too real. And all this comes from human beings not living sensibly. And as such, now there are flood, landslides, and all these natural disasters which we call natural disasters, but in effect are really man-made in their nature. Shanara.
샤샤로 하네요.
So we stop here and break for tea.